This is a story about a powerful woman named Nasira who adopts 10 baby girls, even though in the end she knows they will all die, except for one. When her maids and servants carried the little bundles into her home under the cover of night, she looked at them with disdain. Because as noble as outside spectators believed her to be for taking on this responsibility, this was a forced decision, and a selfish one. And this story won't end well. Nasira invites three spiritually gifted individuals called sages into her home to not only bless the children, but also to assess them to give Nasira and others a glimpse into their futures and what kind of women these babies will grow up to be. One way these sages do that is by assessing the color of their auras. They list out some of the qualities of the girls based on their aura colors, like a public servant, a healer, an artist. But Nasira isn't really interested in these traits or some of the baby's readings. There's only a few that she deems to be worthy of her time and strong enough to eventually be her heir, especially the babies whose auras were closer to her own color, red. When the sages leave, one of her servants presents her with a list of all 10 of the babies, their aura colors, and information on their original birth families and cities. As Nasira's glancing down the list, one of the children catches her eye because of the familiar name of her birth mother. Upon seeing this information, Nasira is filled with eagerness, and the servants aren't sure why. Now, what makes Nasira so powerful is that she's the smartest, strongest, and tallest person in the land. You heard me right, person in the land. The reason for this is that she's the only one currently living from her generation to survive the consumption of a potent and poisonous substance from a rare plant called the euphorbia flower. The lore around this rare flower is that centuries ago, there was a young princess driven away from her kingdom after rival nobles killed her parents in the dead of night and took over the land. Her servants, although they didn't survive, were able to get her out in time through a series of tunnels and help her get away. This young princess rode on her horse into the mountains for weeks until her horse died of starvation, to which she sustained herself on the meat. But once that was gone, she couldn't find any source of food or water. She climbed to the top of one of the cliffs on the mountain and contemplated jumping. But before she could, a flash storm appeared, and a lightning bolt struck the ground, effectively pushing her away from the edge. But when that young woman got up, she saw that where the lightning struck the ground, a pristine white flower with gold-tinned edges bloomed. They began to grow all over the mountain right before her very eyes, and she was able to sustain herself on the nectar from these flowers for a year. Throughout this year, unbeknownst to her, the nectar was drastically changing her body. She grew tall, she grew strong, and her instincts were out of this world. When she felt that she was ready, she returned to her kingdom to fight for the throne in her parents' name, and the subjects were flabbergasted to see how much she's changed and how she towered over everyone. She was arrested, but she escaped, killed the rival king and queen that stole her land, and reclaimed her title. The scientists of her time were perplexed at her changes, and she told them of the white flower that grew on the mountain face that's been sustaining her. A troop of soldiers were sent out to this mountain face to collect some of the flowers so the scientists could test them, and it was discovered that the nectar within the center of these flowers were in fact a potent substance that demonstrated incredible cell regeneration properties that they have never seen before. When this information got out to the people of the land, commoners flocked to the mountains in hopes of harvesting the flower and harnessing this power for themselves. But after many people got a hold of the flowers, illness swept through the entire land and people began to drop dead in the streets. It took years for the scientists to discover that although powerful, the nectar is extremely selective and poisonous to most. The only people who were likely to survive its consumption were small children and babies. But even then, there's no guarantee that it'll take to their system, which was sadly realized after many parents fed it to their young. After witnessing such a devastating loss, the princess turned queen had all of the euphorbia flowers in the land and on the mountain collected and kept contained in a conservatory located within her castle so no one has access to them. With time, the land began to flourish again, and the queen eventually got married. For years, she was happily married to her husband, but eventually that happiness came to a screeching halt when she learned that she could not bear children. This sent the queen into a spiraling depression because after everything she's been through to reclaim her throne, she would now not have a legacy for her people. Until one night, she was startled out of her sleep to three mysterious beings looming over her in the dark. She found that she couldn't move or speak, and the figures reminded her of stories she heard as a little girl of three powerful and ancient beings. One of them spoke to her and told her that her prayers have been answered, and she is destined to become the mother of all mothers. On the next full moon, 15 baby girls will be born through the blessed wombs of the women in her domain. She will raise them and have them drink from the jelly of the euphorbia flower locked away in her conservatory, and only the strongest amongst them will survive. The one left standing will be her legacy. The three mysterious beings disappeared, and the queen couldn't believe the message she just received. The thought of raising 15 children as her own sounded remarkable. But the excitement fell flat as the thought that in the end she could lose all of them but one lingered in her mind. For a couple of days, she went back and forth in her mind between her fear and her desire. She thought the noble thing to do would be to leave them be. But as the full moon drew near and thoughts of never receiving an opportunity like this again filled her mind, she saw her window of opportunity closing. The day of the full moon, she had all of the 15 baby girls born on that day brought to the castle. She took one look at those beautiful babies and immediately fell in love. Unfortunately, that love was short-lived as, just as the three beings said, the jelly from the euphorbia flowers claimed them one after the other. Nasira, being a descendant of this long-standing tradition, is the only woman out of her generation left that has survived the consumption of the euphorbia jelly and must maintain a consistent diet of it so it doesn't attack her system. Now, as the current reigning queen, it's her turn to raise her own brood of babies from her land and have them drink from the euphorbia flowers in order to decipher which one is her next heir and the rightful ruler of their land. What story is this, you may ask? Royal Jelly by me, Aaliyah Zellis.